We are in Gemarah Sanhedrin. We are almost at the end of page 7a, so we are making rapid progress here. Those of you who don't have your Gemarah, let me get one up for you on the screen. Let's also dedicate this shiur to Johnny Halpin, who normally attends this. Let's wish him a refuah shlema. Yosef Yonatan ben Rivka, I'm told that he is progressing as well as can be expected, so that's good news. I will keep you posted to anything else that I hear, and we wish him a refuah shlema, and we hope to see him back with us as soon as possible.
With so many artificial conditions and external requirements.
Right, now then.
So anyway.
Who is not muted? I don't know, but let's mute everybody.
Okay. Started a new shiur. Are you going to be with Lieberman?
Okay, there we go. Right, now everybody's muted. That should be. Right. So, DAF 7a. DAF 7a. We got, last time, we ended off speaking about the verse whereby don't steal from a poor person, or else your soul will get stolen from you. Remember that? That was how we ended off last week. It was a saying of Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani: any judge who takes disputed property or money from his litigant and gives it that to another litigant unlawfully, the Holy One, blessed be he, takes his soul from him. As the Pasuk says, rob not the weak because he is weak, neither crush the poor in the gate. And we had a discussion about the gates, if you remember, that the court took place in the gate when we quoted the Pasuk from Parashat Shoftim. You shall put judges and officers in your gates. We also mentioned Boaz, who did his court case in the gates. We mentioned Mordechai, who sat at the gate of the city. We mentioned Abraham, who did his deal with Ephron in the gate of the city. So that's where we ended up last week. And so we got as far as here. We are at the bottom of the page here. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. Amar Rabbi Yonatan. This is the same person as we quoted before, giving another of his pearls of wisdom. La'olam, always, yireh dayan atzmo. A judge should see himself ki'ilu. That's a very popular word, ki'ilu. If you hear anybody speaking Hebrew, native Hebrew speakers, I guarantee you will hear the word ki'ilu at least 100 times in the first 5 minutes of the conversation. And it's in English, we do it as, the young folk do it as well. And it's like. I was once walking to shul with my daughter when she was about 12 years old. And I decided I would count the number of times that she said like on the way to shul. It's about a 20-minute walk, and she's a bit of a she was then a bit of a chatterbox. And after I got to about 300, I stopped counting. And this is what happens in modern Hebrew with the word ki'ilu. And if you want to sound, when you get to speak Hebrew well, if you want to sound native and you want them to think that you're a good, proper Hebrew speaker, throw in a whole bunch of ki'ilus and they'll love it. You don't have to say anything, just say ki'ilu, kilu. And it means as if, like, you know, it doesn't mean anything in modern Hebrew, but here, the real meaning of the word is as if, ki'ilu, as if it were. So forever, always, a dayan, a judge, should see himself as if, ki'ilu, as if, cherev, there is a sword. Think about this, everyone, especially the men. There is a sword, munachat lo ben yarchotav. There is a sword placed delicately between his thighs. meaning in the position of the Brit Milah. Okay, you've got to, if you're a judge, you have to imagine that you are, what's the word? You have poised between your loins a sword. V'gehinam ptucha lo mitachtav. And Gehinnom, which I suppose you would translate in English as hell, is open up underneath you. Well, I think you can imagine that if you are sitting on the edge of a sword in that particular area and you make one little slip, I imagine that Gehinnom would be a reasonable description of what you would feel. And so this is the expression of Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani in the name of Rabbi Yonatan, that a judge must see himself as poised delicately in a dreadful situation, that one false move by this judge will result in a second Brit Milah and worse, and Gehinnom, hell, opening up beneath him. Well, I think that's a fairly vivid description of how a judge, how seriously a judge must take his job, because he can't afford even a tiny slip, and that's exactly what Rabbi Yonatan is referring to here. He uses this really descriptive expression to tell us that this is serious business that the judges are doing. It's not something that you can take lightly. You have to imagine that one little slip and you've had it. So, of course, we have to bring a scriptural proof for what he's just said. That's what all these sayings are all about. It's about learning. Important principles from scriptural proof. We had a discussion last week. I think it was Julia who mentioned last week that whether what we were doing here, and I said that actually was the other way around. We weren't just bringing proofs to, we weren't explaining the pasuk as in a certain way. We were bringing a proof, an asmachta. David pointed out the word was asmachta, which means a from the words samuch, to lismoch, to rely on, something that you can use as a support. That's the word I was looking for, a support for this idea. So Rabbi Yonatan has given us an idea here that a judge must consider his position precarious when he's judging, and he's now bringing us a verse to prove his position. And he brings us a verse from Shir HaShirim. I'm going to show you Shir HaShirim on the screen. Over here. There we go. Can you see Shir HaShirim now? Yeah. Okay. So this is the pasuk. I don't know if you can see it because it's a bit small. Hine mitato shel Shlomo. I'm going to translate it literally. We've spoken about Shir HaShirim in the past. Shir HaShirim is a love song. It's actually an erotic book. Every translation that you will find, and in particularly the Art Scroll translation, uses it in an allegorical fashion to describe the relationship between God and Israel. And it's the only book of Tanakh that is not translated in any way, shape, or form properly. When I say properly, I mean literally. The words are just not translated because it's an erotic poem, and the Chazal did not want to. Well, the English translators did not want to translate it into an erotic poem, so they have used the Mefarshim. They've translated it using the commentators who compare it to the relationship between God and Israel. But I'm going to translate the pasuk literally so that you can see what the words mean and see how we get to it. Hine, behold, mitato shel Shlomo, Solomon's bed. Shishim giborim savivla. There are 60 giborim, mighty men, around it. Mi giborei Yisrael, from amongst the mighty men of Israel. Kulam achuzei cherev. Mulumdei milchama. Each one of them is holding a sword. Each one of these 60 men is holding a sword. Mulumdei milchama. they are well learned in warfare. So these are top soldiers. Ish charbo al yirecho. Each man has his sword on his thigh. That's where you keep your sword. If you remember, we had this whole discussion when we learned Sefer Shoftim about the left-handed judge, Ehud, who had his sword on his right thigh instead of his left thigh, because that's how he wore it, because he was left-handed. You wear your sword on your thigh. If you're right-handed, you wear it on your left side, so you can pull it out with your right hand, and vice versa. So each man had his sword on his thigh, mipachad baleilot, because of fear at night. Now, what on earth is this verse talking about? So the mitato shel Shlomo, the bed of Shlomo. Here it's talking, the literal translation is talking about the marital bed. But the Mefarshim say that wherever Shlomo is mentioned in the Tanakh, you will see it later on in the Gemarah here, it refers to Hashem, Hamelech Sheyesh Shalom Lo, the king who has peace to him. So Shlomo is a euphemism in Shir Hashirim for Hashem. So where is Hashem's bed, as it were, or Hashem's couch? Where does Hashem live? The temple, Beit HaMikdash, or the Mishkan. So Mitato shel Shlomo means the Beit HaMikdash in the commentary of Shir Hashirim. So in the Beit HaMikdash, there were these 60 Giborim. Now, who are these Giborim? The word 60, according to Rashi, is not relevant. It just refers to a lot. Who are the Giborim? Who are the mighty men who hang around the temple? Who might they be? Any offers?
The personal guard.
Not the Levium, Marcel. Who are you saying, Michael?
The personal guard.
Not the personal guards either. That's not what they're referring to in our Gemarah anyway. You may well be right, both of you, that the Levium and the guards may well be part of this. The beauty of this pasuk is you can say whatever you want about it. And that's what this Gemarah is doing. It's taking this pasuk and explaining it in the way it wants to. No, the Giborim that they're mentioning here, the Giborim that hung around the temple, was the Sanhedrin. That was where the great Sanhedrin sat. He's referring to the judges. According to Rabbi Yonatan in our Gemarah, this pasuk is referring to the judges. These mighty men of Israel are the judges. And where were they? They were in where the Sanhedrin sat, which was at the Beit HaMikdash, which is mitato shel Shlomo, Shlomo's bed. I know it's a bit sort of tenuous, all these links, but that's how Rabbi Yonatan explains this pasuk. If you don't like it, don't shoot the messenger here. This is Rabbi Yonatan's explanation, not mine. Okay, so Hine, behold, mitato shel Shlomo, in the temple where the Sanhedrin sat, there are these 60 men, these great Giborei Yisrael, the mighty men of Israel, i.e. the Sanhedrin, the judges. Kulam, each one of them hold a sword, melumdei milchama. They are skilled in warfare. And what Rabbi Yonatan says is, melumdei milchama doesn't mean warfare, literally warfare. It means sparring. It means verbal warfare. We have we've got two of our advocates with us today. We haven't got, three of them. I can see three. Yes, we haven't got Julia, but we've got 3 out of our 4. So you guys are referred to as mighty men or women, and although women can't be judges in Jewish law, but we'll come to that another time. So you are the mighty men, and you are melumdei milchama because you are skilled in warfare. Am I right in saying, lawyers, that when you're in court, it's a battle? It's a battle against your opponent. It might not be a physical battle, but it's certainly a battle of words. It's a battle of skill in advocacy and in knowing the law. It's an adversarial approach. Not all courts are adversarial, but many courts are adversarial. Leon, you want to disagree with me?
Yes, slightly. We're not judges, though. It's if you say that the 60 men are the Sanhedrin, the lawyers are not the judges.
You're right, but I think we established at the end of last week's shiur, David Marks gave us a sneak preview of what we will come to in about 15 years' time. That the way it works in the Sanhedrin is there are no lawyers. It's done a bit like the continental magistrates in France that you'll be familiar with, Leon, where they are doing the investigation. They're the investigator as well as the judge. I always think, whenever I hear about that, I always think of Peter Sellers in the Pink Panther, but that's just by the way. So it's that sort of scenario. 1 second, Marcel, I'll come to you in a sec. So it's that kind of scenario where the judges are actually the investigators, if you like, as well. And you can imagine, Leon, if you can, imagine the scenario whereby they hear the evidence and then the judges retire to discuss their evidence. Remember, it's not a single judge. We've got a bench. And they will then be saying, well, I think it's X. And the other judge will say, well, I think it's Y. And then you've got the verbal sparring and the verbal milchama, the verbal warfare there. So certainly you're right to point out that we're talking about judges and not advocates here. But I think that we can understand what he's getting at if we understand how the scenario worked there, which is that the witnesses come before the Bet Din, the judges interrogate the witnesses, examine and cross-examine the witnesses. Then, when they retire to consider their verdict, they will then, as I suppose the jury would do. I've never done jury service, but I imagine that's what a jury does. It puts forward the various scenarios from the evidence. One person will say, well, I think X, and another person will say, well, I think Y, and then everybody has their two pennies worth. And so I imagine that's how it would have happened in the Bet Din. And so that's why they're called Melumdei Milchama. Before I come to the guys with their hands up, let's just finish the pasuk. Ish charbo al yurecho. Each man his sword on his thigh. And of course, this is why Rabbi Yonatan has brought this pasuk to support his idea that judges are sitting there in a precarious position with a sword between their legs. He's using this pasuk in a sort of a metaphorical way, that where the pasuk says each man has got his sword on his thigh, which means basically each man has his weapons, so each judge will have his knowledge as a weapon. That's a simple explanation of the pasuk. Rabbi Yonatan is using this pasuk to support his position that says these judges are in a difficult position here because one little slip means that the sword between their thighs will cause them to have Gehinnom. Now, what about Gehinnom? Where does he get that from? Look at the end of the pasuk. Mipachad baleilot, because of fear at night. What is night? Night is darkness. Fear and darkness, that is a description of a bad situation, Gehinnom. So you can see why Rabbi Yonatan has found this pasuk to support his position. And I think, well, these two psukim really, I think it's very nice that he has used that and explained those psukim, which in my humble opinion, almost certainly the author of those psukim, Shlomo Melech, did not mean what Rabbi Yonatan has explained those psukim to be. But that is the beauty of all drasha. This is drasha. This is not pshat. This is drush. This is explanation rather than the simple meaning of the psukim. And there are different levels of understanding of Tanakh. You've got pshat, that's the simple explanation. You've got drush, which is what this is. And then you've got sod, which is secret. That's all the mystical stuff, which I have to say is far beyond me and is not my cup of tea at all. But there you go. There are some people that are very into all that mystical stuff, and that's another level altogether. And as we've said many times, Shivim Panim LaTorah. So Rabbi Yonatan has used these psukim here, and I think darshan them from that same word as drush in a very nice way to support his position, which is to tell us that the judges have to be very careful in their judgment, otherwise it will be very bad for them. Right, we have some people. Marcel wanted to be first. Marcel, Michael, and Howard in that order, please. Marcel.
Am I open? Yes. Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Very nice explanation about the Shishim being Sanhedrin, but I'm a little troubled by it because why did he say 60 and not 70? Usually people understand Sanhedrin by the word 70. And
I was troubled by the same thing, Marcel. Well spotted. And if you look at Rashi, still on the page here, the Rashi is in the grayed out boxes here. They're using 60 myriad. So that's the famous number which is bandied about in Jewish literature all over the place, which is 600,000. 60 myriad, I think, is 600,000, and that's that mythical number of the number of people that came out of Mitzrayim, and it basically means a lot.
Shishim went down to Egypt. 70
people went down to Egypt.
Was it 70?
Yeah, 70 went down to Egypt, and 600,000 came out. That's not a bad return for your money, is it? I think Rabbi Yonatan, Rabbi Yonatan doesn't mention that, and he obviously doesn't mention it because it is a bit of a problem. It's what we would call that explanation. That bit of the explanation is what we would call a bit of a dray, right? He's had to dray about that because 60 is not 70, and it's not the Sanhedrin, as you say. But the numbers, as you'll see later on in a few minutes, hopefully, the numbers are not always what they seem to be. But yes, well spotted there, Marcel. Michael, I think you were next.
Yeah, I've taken my hand down. I had exactly the same comments.
Right, excellent. Good. Howard?
Virtually the whole of Europe follows the Code Napoleon, which is inquisitorial. The common law systems of Britain, England and Wales, America and Israel are accusatorial, which brings out the adversarial best in the lawyers. Can you clarify what you think the Sanhedrin adhered to more closely?
I think the Sanhedrin was definitely inquisitorial. Without a doubt, it was inquisitorial. The judges had the responsibility to do the inquisition, to get the facts, and then to rule on the facts. And that is how a Beis Din works today. However, a Beis Din today has another level to it, which I don't think was present in the times of the Sanhedrin, and that is they have you can have a toveya. You can bring with you somebody who will put forward your case. So you're putting forward the case to the Dayanim, and so in some ways, what they have done is to make a shiluv. A combination of the two systems in a Beit Din today. So if I am taking somebody to Beit Din because I think that he owes me money, I can present my case myself, or I can employ somebody who knows the halachot better than me, who will present my case in front of the Beit Din in a better way than I can, and my opponent can do the same. And generally speaking, that is done in Beit Din. The more complicated the case, the more likely you are to have a toveya, because you need to know the halachot in the same way as you explained. I think it was you that explained when we were discussing last week when Nachum said that all lawyers should be at best sacked and at worst shot at dawn. I think you explained that. Sorry?
At worst, keep their sword between their legs.
Yes, absolutely. I think you explained very eloquently that one needs somebody who knows the law to present the law. And so Batei Din today do have advocates, but they don't have to be advocates. They can be a litigant in person. Originally, it was all litigant in person, but because today the vast majority of litigants do not know the halachot, they need to employ a tovea. The method of the Sanhedrin and the Bet Din in the time of the Gemarah that we're talking about, and the time of the Mishnah, was inquisitorial. And today it remains inquisitorial, but there is an adversarial element because of the introduction of Toveim, of these advocates on behalf of the litigants, basically because of the ignorance of the vast majority of litigants.
Did they have people that worked for the Sanhedrin or now for the Bet Din that are working for them to do their investigations so that they understand the case better, or did they just do it on their own?
I think the Dayanim are basically the ones who do the investigation on the judges. It may well be that the Dayanim ask for expert assistance. So, for example, very much of the Batei Din's work today sadly involves matrimonial cases of divorces. And it's not unusual for the courts, for the Dayanim to, before they make their decisions on how much the fellow's got to pay and who gets custody and all those kind of things that the Bet Din decides in divorce cases, it's not unusual for the Bet Din to ask for expert help. So they may ask for a psychological report on the husband or the wife or the children or whatever it is. They may ask for financial reports. They may ask for accounting assistance to understand these things. But it is up to the judges to decide what help they want. They don't have, as it were, that sort of in-house folk that they would employ like that. It's done on a case-by-case basis. Okay, so let's carry on.
Johnny.
Yes,
Johnny.
David.
Yeah, I've got found here an answer to Marcel's question. The Vilna Gaon brings. He explains when the Sanhedrin met, there were 60 around the side, and in the middle were the 10 most important members of the Sanhedrin. 7 of them were referred to as Ro'ei Pnei HaMelech, and 3 referred to as Shomrei Hasaf, the expressions which we find in the Megillah, which refer also, according to Midrash, to the cult surrounding Hashem. So that's where he gets the 70 in.
Wow, that's brilliant. Where did you find that?
That's one of the sources I use for Gemarah.
And we have a copy of that.
Can you send us either a copy or a link or something later on? That would be really interesting. So let's just flesh that out a bit. And my ears pricked up when you said that there were 10 in the middle, because what we're going to see in the next piece of Gemarah is that there's a situation of 10 judges are brought forward, and this is the first time we ever see 10 judges. And I'm wondering if we can fit that in. So what you're suggesting here, what you've found for us, is that there were 10 in the middle and 60 around. Well, look at the pasuk. Shishim Giborim Saviv La, around the bed of Shlomo, around the house where Hashem is. So we're going to say allegorically here that the 10 in the middle are, as it were, sitting on God's bed. They are the closest to God. And as David has said, they are called Ro'ei Pnei HaMelech, the ones who see the face of the king, referring to Hashem. So they would be the most senior judges. So you've got 10 in the middle, 60 around, and that would fit very, very nicely with that pasuk. Thank you for that, David, and thank you to the Vilna Gaon.
The Vilna Gaon, yeah.
Yeah, but thank you for bringing it to our attention. That's excellent. Great. Okay, let's carry on in the Gemarah. Okay, so let's go here. So here's our pasuk. Mipachta shel Gehinnom shedome lalayla. The fear of Gehinnom is like the night. So we've explained that. And over here, he says here, the bed of God. What is this mitato shel Shlomo? In this verse, God is referred to as Solomon, Shlomo, the king to whom peace belongs, like we explained before. Okay, so that's that little bit nicely dealt with. Here comes the next one. This is very interesting. I meant to look something up, and I'm just going to do it now. Well, no, I'm not going to do it now because it'll interrupt. Somebody else can do it in a minute. Right, let's go on. Darash Rabbi Yoshia. There's that word darash from drasha, same word. Rabbi Yoshia explained or interpreted, made a drasha. And again, remember the difference from pshat and drasha. Pshat is a simple explanation. Drasha is when you interpret something. So Rabbi Yoshia made a drasha. Va'itema, and some say it wasn't Rabbi Yoshia, it was Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak. Doesn't make any difference to us which one it was, really. My dichtiv, what is the meaning of that which is written? And then he quotes a verse from Jeremiah. Beit David, the house of David, Ko Amar Hashem, so says Hashem, Dino la boker mishpat, execute justice in the morning, boker in the morning, v'hatzilu gazol miyad oshek, and deliver the stolen goods from the hand of the oppressor. So there's a pasuk from Jeremiah. So what do we have to do? Of course, if you're in yeshiva and you're learning, you just carry on. But if you're in the Poleg Sanhedrin Shia, then you have to go to the pasuk. So that's what we will do. We will go to Jeremiah, and there it is, all ready for you. So what is the context of this pasuk? What is Jeremiah talking about? Now, you have to understand who Jeremiah was, who was a prophet Yirmiyahu, when did he live, and what was his job in life? Well, Jeremiah had a life of almost abject misery. He lived at the time towards the end of the first temple, when the writing was on the wall, if you'll pardon the mixed Tanakh, that the temple was going to be destroyed. The Babylonians were on the ascendancy. The house of Judah was in the descendancy. The temple was about to be destroyed. And Jeremiah was sadly the prophet, sadly for him, the prophet that had to warn the people about their behavior and about what was going to happen as a result of their bad behavior. And if you read the book of Jeremiah, which we will eventually get to in our Tanakh Shir in about 100 years, we will get to that and we will learn the context there. You'll see it's almost unremitting dirge. Jeremiah was also the author of Eicha, Lamentations. He had a miserable life. He was put in prison for saying things against the king. His books were burned. Eicha was burned initially. He had a terrible life. So let's have a look at what the context of our pasuk here is. Do you have your Jeremiah to hand, Leon?
Yes.
I thought you might. Okay, let's read the first few psukim, starting at the beginning of this chapter.
The beginning of the chapter.
Yeah.
Okay. The word that came to Jeremiah from Hashem when King Zedekiah sent Pashur, son of Malchiah, and Zephaniah, son of Maaseiah, the Cohen, to him, saying, please inquire of Hashem on our behalf for Nebuchadrezzar, king of Babylonia. is making war against us. Perhaps Hashem will act towards us in accordance with all his past wonders, and the king will withdraw from us.
Let's just stop there for a second. So what's happening here is they can see that Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Bavel, is waging war, and suddenly they've decided to wake up, and they've gone to Jeremiah, who is the prophet, and they say, interestingly, look at verse 2 in the Hebrew, Darash na ba'adenu. Darash, it's the same word. It means here, inquire of, or go and ask of. We had it. We had it in last week's Sedra, did we not? Lidrosh et Hashem. Rivka, when she had these twins in her womb, fighting with one another. Vatelech lidrosh et Hashem. She went to inquire of God. So this drash, the same word here, drash, as we've been using. So the people say to Jeremiah the prophet, go and ask Hashem to intervene for us, because we can see we're in a bit of sorrow here with Nebuchadnezzar, and maybe Hashem will do these wonderful things for us. He'll do miracles, and Nebuchadnezzar will run away. That is what they request, and this is what they got back. Carry on, Leon.
Jeremiah replied to them, say thus to Zedekiah, thus said Hashem, God of Israel, behold, I am turning about the weapons in your hands, with which you presume to fight the king of Babylonia and the Chaldeans, who are besieging you from outside the wall. And I shall gather the invader into this city. And I myself shall fight you with an outstretched hand and a strong arm, and with anger and wrath and great rage. I shall strike down the inhabitants of this city, the people and the animals. They will all die in great pestilence. After this, the word of Hashem, I will deliver Zedekiah, king of Judah, and his servants and the people and whoever in this city has survived the pestilence, the sword and the famine, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, into the hand of their enemies, and into the hand of those who seek their lives. He will strike them down by the edge of the sword. He will not take pity. He will not show compassion, and he will not have mercy. And to this people you shall say, thus said Hashem, behold, I place before you the path of life and the path of death.
Okay, let's just stop there for a sec. So we've just had the response. The question was, please, Hashem, will you help us in this war against Nebuchadnezzar? And the response is, not only will I not help you, I'm actually going to be fighting against you. I am going to utterly destroy you. I'm going to hand you over to your enemies. You are not my favorite people anymore. I am going to deal very harshly with you. That's what Hashem says. And then he says this very strange thing. I placed before you the way of life and the way of death. Let's just bear that pasuk in mind. Verse 8, it's a strange pasuk. He's just said, I'm going to kill you all. So what's he mean? I'm going to place before you the way of life and the way of death. Let's carry on and see what happens. Verse 9.
Whoever remains in this city will die by the sword, or by famine, or by pestilence. But whoever leaves and surrenders to the Chaldeans, who are besieging you, will live, and his life will be his spoils.
So he says, okay, you could live, but it ain't going to be fun, because the only way you can live is to give yourself up to the enemy. So you've got two choices here. You either go into exile under the enemy, or you're going to die. So don't think that I'm going to help you out at all. Let's carry on. Verse 10.
Verse 10 again, yeah. For I have directed my attention to this city, for evil and not for good, the word of Hashem, and it shall be delivered into the hand of the king of Babylonia, and he will burn it down in fire. And to the house of the king of Judah say, hear the word of Hashem,
Right,
O
stop
house
there
of
for a
David.
sec. Stop there for a sec. So Hashem has said, it's bad news, folks. You've finished. And then he gives a special message. Hear the word of the Lord. Shimu Dvar Hashem. That means listen up good to what I'm about to say. And then he quotes our pasuk, which is the one from our Gemarah. So off you go, Leon. Verse 12.
O house of David, thus said Hashem, administer justice diligently and save the robbed from the hand of an oppressor, lest my anger rage forth like a fire. It will burn, but there will be no one to extinguish it due to the wickedness of your deeds.
Okay, so what is that pasuk telling us in the context of this chapter of Jeremiah? It seems to be completely out of place. The people go and ask for help. God says, no, I'm going to destroy you. The only way you've got to live is to go and be captives to the Kasdim, the Chaldeans. And then he suddenly says, oh, execute justice in the morning and rescue the robbed, lest my fury go forth like fire. What he's saying here is clearly that this is the cause of the problems that you find yourself in. You have not executed justice in the morning, and you have not rescued the robbed from the hand of the robber. In other words, who is the one who executes justice? The judges. Who is the one that can rescue the robbed from the hand of the robber? The judges, when they make their judgments. And what Hashem is saying here is that the cause of the destruction of Jerusalem, the cause of the destruction of the temple, the cause of the exile is placed squarely on the shoulders of the judges. And the system, the institutional corruption, that is what this pasuk is telling us. At this time, there was institutional corruption. The courts were corrupt, the judges were corrupt, and it caused God's fury to go forth like fire, as we've just said in this pasuk. And then we get the last two pasukim, which Leon will just read for us now, verse 13 and 14.
Behold, I am against you, O dweller near the valley, on the mountain of the plain. The word of Hashem. You who say, who can attack us? Who can enter our abodes? I shall repay you according to the fruits of your deeds, the word of Hashem, and I shall set fire to its forest, which will consume all around it.
So what we're seeing here is a very clear message from Hashem via the prophet Yirmiyahu, that the cause of our troubles at that time were to do with lack of justice. And lack of justice is a problem that we found when we read our shiur on Zechariah. Remember, on Tisha B'Av, we spoke about the same thing. Zechariah said, they asked him, shall we still fast? We've got a second temple now, we don't need to fast. And basically Hashem said, you need to keep on fasting until you correct the things that caused the problem in the first place. And that was lack of justice. There was social justice and legal justice quoted by Zechariah. Here we're talking about the judges. So the context of this pasuk that the Gemarah is quoting is to tell us, what can we learn from that? We can learn that when you have a corrupt system, when you have institutional corruption, when you have the judges who are not judging justly, tzedek tirdof, which we read in Parashat Shoftim, you have to judge, even the judgments have to be judged in a way of righteousness. When that doesn't happen, Hashem gets very angry, and when Hashem gets very angry, we've just read what happens. So that's the background to our pasuk. Larry and Sharon have their mutual hand up. Speak to us, Larry and Sharon.
Yes, I am. Sorry, I had to unmute. Good morning. I just wanted to bring something from last week's shiur, which Larry and I listened to catch up, and what we're talking about here. That went straight to the question of Jeremiah and our first exile. That our tenancy in this land of God, because we are just tenants, is always put as conditional. Always put as conditional. And in this time, here we are talking about the first exile. In last week, we talked about the soul, that we would not have an afterlife, or that our afterlife would be impacted by injustice. And I think it's interesting that as you mentioned, the Gemarah was being discussed when we had both an exile in Babylonia and a liminal tolerance of our presence, but not sovereignty, in Israel. And that it's interesting that they went from the actual exile to the exile of the soul as the way of punishment. Again, there's always this sense of tremendous conditionality in our tenure in sovereignty and our tenure under God's Shekhinah.
And I just wanted to add that Nahum wanted to get rid of all of us lawyers, and so being retired, I'm not too worried about that. But it sounds like the problem is the judges, not the lawyers.
Okay, so let me just deal with the second thing first, and that is that we spoke about it earlier on. In the Bet Din, the lawyers, the judges take on the role of the lawyers as well to a certain degree. So I think you're still in the firing line there, Larry, from Nahum's double barrel there. But let me go on to what Sharon has said, and she's absolutely right, of course, that there are numerous places in the Torah, particularly in Sefer Dvarim, where we are told, when you come into the land, this is Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, just before his death, and he's speaking to the people in Sefer Dvarim before they enter the land, and he's giving them their last warnings, and he says to them on numerous occasions, the land will vomit you out if you don't behave properly. If you behave like the nations of the land who I'm now kicking out, if you behave like them, I'll kick you out too. There is complete conditionality on us being in this land. And it even goes as far as to say, to spell it out to us, that if we were to say, Kochi v'otzem yadi, all this wonderful stuff that I have, including the land, is all due to Kochi, my koach, my power, v'otzem yadi, and the strength of my hand. If we say that, then that is a recipe for us to be kicked out, because we are here entirely conditionally on behaving appropriately. Now, that should worry us considerably, I believe, because we are here, it seems, miraculously. I'm very reluctant to go down the Kochi v'otzim yadi line and say we are here because we have the strongest army. We do have a strong army, Baruch Hashem, and we're doing our bit. But we are here conditional on God's wanting us to be here. And you can see from the words of Yirmiyahu that we've just read that the minute he doesn't want us to be here, it's bad news. And we have to remember that conditionality. Now, we, of course, are all doing our bit. Everybody can do their individual bit to make the whole. Each one of us adds up to the sum of the whole nation. The nation is broken down into individuals, and we all have to do our bit. And I think that the comforting thing is, if you look in this wonderful land of Israel, and you look how much chesed is done, how many gemachim there are, how many people are helped, I'm not saying it's perfect. It is not perfect by a long way, but it's those people who are executing justice, who are executing social justice, or who are doing their bit to help the downtrodden and the poor. They are the people who are keeping us in this land, because without them, we will be left with institutional corruption. And we've just read what institutional corruption leads to. So we all have a responsibility, an individual responsibility to execute social justice to the very best of our ability. Whenever you get an opportunity to do something good for somebody in an altruistic fashion, as well as doing it in an altruistic fashion and knowing that you're doing a good deed, have in the back of your mind that actually you are a soldier keeping the Jewish people in the land of Israel, because without that, we would be left in a situation that Yirmiyahu has described, in a situation where we have a corrupt system with no counterbalances. Yes, Marcel.
Very interesting, the angle of looking at this. From our side, we say that the exile was because we were corrupt. Yet Nebuchadnezzar took the tribes, took the Bnei Israel from, after destroying the Beit HaMikdash, took them not as manual slaves, but as cultural slaves. He wanted to upgrade his own empire with people of culture. Now this leads us to say, when they got there to Bavel, and they were only there 70 years, which is a very short period, at what point did they mend their ways in this judgment? Because we're told the Sanhedrin was operating because Mordechai was from the Sanhedrin. So did they in fact learn their lesson and mend their ways?
Okay, that's a very good question. I'm tempted to say that there must have been a certain mending of the ways, or else they wouldn't have been allowed back. But I don't think it was a complete mending of the ways, because the Tkufa, the era of the Second Temple, was a pale shadow of the era of the First Temple. As we know, only about 20% of the people returned from Bavel. And those that did return were the schleppers. They were the poor folk, not the ones that had made themselves comfortable in Bavel and were knackers. And there were all sorts of things that were not present in the second Beit HaMikdash, which were in the first Beit HaMikdash. And so it was a pale imitation in some ways. So I'm tempted to say that there was a partial mending of their ways. Had there been a complete teshuvah, I believe that we would have been led back to the land in all our glory with the whole of us, and that the tekufa of the Second Temple would not have been such a poor period of time, because for the majority of the time of the Second Temple, we were under the kosh. We were not sovereign. We were not sovereign for almost none of it, only during the short period of time of the Hashmonaim. We were under the kosh. It was a poor period of time for us. And what we think of sometimes as this sort of golden age of the Second Temple was not such a great golden age, to be honest. Eventually we'll talk about that when we come to that in history. But so my initial thoughts, and I'm interested to know if anybody else has anything else to say on it. My initial answer to your question is, I suspect that there was a partial mending of their ways. Yes,
Johnny, what wasn't brought up, what I was trying to say, and I guess I was obtuse, is that it's interesting to see how transformed the threat of loss of sovereignty was to the loss of life in the eternal. That the afterlife had not been really part of more of the biblical outlook, but it was transformed at the time of the Talmud into a facsimile of the exile, that a loss of the life hereafter was the equivalent to loss of sovereignty.
Okay, so I don't know whether it's advertent or inadvertent, but you have stumbled into a very thorny area, and that is the afterlife. Not that you stumbled into the afterlife, literally, God forbid, not yet anyway. But this whole concept of the afterlife in Jewish thought is a thorny area, because if you look very carefully in the whole of Tanakh, you will not find anything that talks about the afterlife. It's a much later idea which was brought into by the rabbis, and again, possibly as a result of being in a miserable for life, if you like. It's the sort of Wizard of Oz scenario that somewhere over the rainbow there is a better life. Now that's a very cynical and not a very popular view amongst Haredi rabbis, but that actually is my view of the afterlife, that it was, whether there is or there isn't, nobody knows. Nobody's come back to tell us, but it's definitely a concept that was brought in as you have, and I think this is what, if I understand you correctly, that at the time of exile, when things are bad, then an afterlife becomes an important thing, and loss of that afterlife is seen as disastrous. So maybe one day we'll discuss the afterlife, but not right now. Okay, I'd like to just finish this little, if you'll bear with me a few minutes. I just want to finish this little section of the Gemarah. So we've quoted this pasuk, and we've gone back to Yirmiyahu, and we now understand a little bit about Jeremiah's life and about Jeremiah's situation. Nothing to do with the Gemarah, but I think it's worthwhile doing. But the Gemarah has a question. V'chi b'boker donin, v'chol hayom ein danin. What do you mean, execute justice in the morning? Are you telling me, asks the Gemarah, that we only make judgments in the morning and we don't do judgments all day long? My experience of the court system in the UK is that they are bone idle, and they start towards the middle of the day and they finish just after the middle of the day. So I think that the question here, no, Howard's shaking his head. Well, that's not true, Howard. It is very true. They start at 10:30, they knock off at lunch for 12:30 till 2 o'clock, and then they knock off for a break at 3 for 15 minutes. And then if you're lucky, they go on till 4:30. They don't know what a day's work is. Anyway, that's just me having a little rant about the legal system. So here the question is, do they only make judgments in the morning? Surely they make judgments all day long. So the Gemarah says, no, you've misunderstood the pasuk. And this is what I was going to look up before, and I forgot to do it. It says, Ella, no, rather, this is what the pasuk means. Im barur lecha hadavar kaboker. If the matter, talking to the judges, if the matter, the verdict is clear to you, like the morning, then amrehu, then you can give your verdict. V'im lav, but if it's not as clear as the morning, al tomarehu, do not say it. What I wanted to look up was the origins of the English expression as clear as daylight. Yeah, you've all heard that expression. I don't know if the Americans have that expression. It's definitely, or all the South Africans, but it's definitely an English expression, as clear as daylight. And I wonder whether this is the original origin of that expression, because what the Gemarah is saying is that a judgment must be as clear as the morning, as clear as daylight. This is exactly what this expression means. It has to be as clear as daylight before you give your verdict. In other words, it's a warning to the judge. Don't be hasty in your judgment. Investigate it and make sure that in your mind it is as clear as the morning, as clear as daylight, that the verdict is correct. Go on, Howard.
I didn't see Booker on the other sheet, and indeed it wasn't translated that way.
No, it wasn't, was it?
When Leon read out the translation, he didn't say morning.
No, I think he did. I think he did on my translation. Let's have a look. Yes, execute justice in the morning. But you're right. I also noticed that.
Hebrew there. There's no Booker in the Hebrew.
Yeah, it is there. Dino la Boker. There it is. Where my thing is
like
there.
a llama to me, like a llama to me. Okay.
It?
So, yes.
But you're right,
Okay.
Leon's translation, I noticed that as well. Read it again, Leon, that verse for us, 12.
I've moved on to the.
Oh, you're ahead of us. Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure that you didn't use the word morning in your translation. But anyway, that's our Gemarah. Tells us that the judge has to be as clear as day, as clear as the morning in his judgment. Have you got it there, Leon?
No, I
You haven't. Okay.
withdrew
Never
my
mind.
little yellow
I'm pretty sure
slip.
you never said morning. Yes, Larry or Sharon.
This is very different from what is the Gemarah reasoning that's put out, but it seems to me from the Chumash, it says that if you take the clothing of the cloak of someone as a guarantee, of a poor man as guarantee, you must give it back to him by the evening, so that he doesn't sleep dishonored and naked. And to me, doing justice in the morning means you don't dally. You get justice done. Justice is due at the beginning of the day, and you have to get it done right away. No procrastination, no putting it off, which of course is not exactly what's happening in this country right now.
That's an interesting approach, because as I read the Gemarah, it's the opposite, because they're saying, don't be hasty in your judgment. If it's not clear to you, wait, investigate further, and don't say it. Al Tom Rehu, don't give the judgment until it's clear as daylight. So
I'm not saying to give judgment in a hurry. It's that one must get to the business of doing justice, of hearing the case early. You can't do it fighting, because justice delayed is justice denied.
Okay, so the British courts that don't get going until 10:30 in the morning, they are falling foul of Sharon's warning here to get things going, because they don't get going till halfway through the morning. Yes, Leon.
The translation in that verse 12: administer justice diligently.
Right, there you go. So that fits in with Sharon, I think, in a way. Diligently could mean get on with it, don't mess about. It also fits with the Gemarah that says do it thoroughly. But it's interesting that it doesn't use the word morning, which is in the actual pasuk. So Howard was right on that. Let's just finish this little bit, because we're going to see another explanation of the same thing. Rabbi Chia bar Abba amar Rabbi Yonatan mehacha. Another opinion as to where we get the idea that you must be very clear in your mind before you give a judgment. And they quote a verse that we've had before, actually. Emor lachochma achoti at. And this is from Proverbs. We've had this verse before. Let me find it for you. There it is. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and you shall call understanding a kinsman. The simple explanation of the pasuk is that you should be very close to chokhmah. In other words, you should have wisdom as something very close to you, like your sister. You're very close to your sister, so you should have it should be something very dear to you and very close to you. But what the Gemarah is saying is, oh, I lost it. Where's it gone? There it is. The Gemarah is saying, Im barur lecha hadavar, if the matter is clear to you, ke'achotcha shehi asura lecha, in the same way it is absolutely clear that your sister is forbidden to you as a wife, omrehu, then you can give the judgment. So in other words, it's another simile, as clear as daylight is the simile that we got from the first pasuk. The second one would be, it's as clear that as you can't marry your sister. That's how clear it's got to be. Everybody knows you can't marry your sister. And so when you give your judgment, it has to be a judgment that is as clear as that. If not, v'im lav, and if not, al tomarehu, do not give the judgment. There is another explanation here up the top right-hand corner over here. Rabbeinu Hananel says not that it's as clear that your sister you shouldn't marry your sister, but it's as clear that your sister is your sister. In other words, if you were to see your sister, you would know that that was your sister. You know what your sister looks like. You're not going to get mixed up and say, oh, I've made a mistake, you're not my sister. So it's as clear as day, or it's as clear that your sister is your sister, or it's as clear that you can't marry your sister. They're all psukim that the rabbis are using to support their view in warning the judges to be very careful in the way they make their judgments, and do not be hasty in giving a judgment. Rather, toss it around in your mind and amongst you until it is absolutely clear as daylight, or as clear as your sister, that you have got the right judgment. It's a warning. And why should you do that? Because if you don't, that little sword that is resting precariously between your loins may just slip, and you will have Gehenna in front of you. So that is the Gemarah that we've learned today, has been a warning to the judges. And at the same time, we managed to join it into the Sefer Yirmiyahu, which tells us what happens if the judges are not behaving in a correct way. So we'll call it a day there for now, and we will carry on, please God, next week. Any questions before we stop the recording? Yes, Jeffrey. Unmute, Jeffrey, we can't hear you. Jeffrey, unmute.
Yeah.
There we go.
What you mentioned about a woman can't be a judge. Wasn't Deborah classed as a judge?
Some say yes and some say no. Those that want to say that a woman can be a judge will bring that as a support. Others say that she wasn't a proper judge. She was only an advisor to the judge. It's a complicated story. There are very good supports in the Gemarah for allowing women judges, and I strongly believe that in the modern Orthodox world, in the very near future, there will be modern Orthodox courts which have women judges. You will have to wait a very long time, probably until we've finished Sanhedrin 10 times over, until you get the Haredi court with a woman judge. But I do believe that that will happen in the modern Orthodox world, because there are a lot of supports in the Tanakh and in the Gemarah for it. And one of these days we'll do a special shiur on that, because it's a fascinating topic. Any other points? Okay, in that case, I shall wish you a Yom Tov, and see you next time.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you, Johnny.